Today I want to talk about the story that probably would have killed DC Comics, at least for the 5 years it was supposed to be running for. Let me take you back to 2019. In 2019, there was leaks of a giant event about to happen at DC Comics. It was known as 5G. What we were getting leaks of is that 5G was going to introduce a brand new roster in the DC universe. We were going to get Luke Fox as Batman. We were going to get John Kent as Superman. We were going to get a brand new Wonder Woman. I think the plan at the time was Yara Flor. There was a new roster for the entire lineup. And the reasoning was they wanted to create the 5th generation of DC superheroes. They wanted to have a new series of stories going on in DC. Immediately, the fan backlash was pretty crazy. It doesn't matter what side of the political argument or what side of the fandom argument you are on, no one agreed that 5G was a good idea. That's pretty much what was going on. Sure, the idea of a new generation of superheroes seemed cool on paper, but the problem is the leaks stated we'd be losing Bruce Wayne, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And I've made this analogy many times before, but if your favorite restaurant were to get rid of its entire menu, you wouldn't go visit. But if they were to pepper in new items with the old items, you would still go visit. Dan on our team loves to get a burger with an egg on it. And if there is a burger with an egg on it at your restaurant, we can go to your restaurant and try out your entire menu, because if nothing sounds good to him, he will have a burger with an egg on it. The man will literally break down if there's no burger with an egg on it. But that's kind of what I'm getting at with 5G. As far as I saw, there was no one in agreement that we needed a 5G, a 5th generation of superheroes, that would completely wipe out the old guard. But that's what was going on, with one man in charge of it named Dan DiDio, who eventually left DC. And the theory was over backlash from 5G, but we never got any confirmation on that. Now, Bleeding Cool is a website in the comic book community that gives everything from the greatest scoops ever to new stories that are coming out to random tabloid-style gossip. Pretty much, if it's in the comic book world, Bleeding Cool will talk about it, which leads us to today. Rich Johnson, the writer of many Bleeding Cool articles, is also known for getting the scoops and talking to a lot of writers behind the scenes. Because he has a lot of connections, a lot of his stuff is easily believed. And he recently put out an 18-page article that basically reveals everything that was going to happen in 5G. And it looks awesome and terrible at the same time. If this is true, and I don't have any confirmation if it is or isn't, but he supposedly spoke to a lot of writers to get this potentially was going to kill DC. Now, for those of you who wanted some major change-up or status quos changing in DC, this would have entirely been what you were looking for. But for those of you who also don't want them to change Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, entirely the opposite of what you're looking for. Anyway, today I want to go over the story that probably would have killed DC based on the articles written by Rich Johnson. And we're going to go through each of the 15 chapters, because after writing pretty much the conclusion of the overarching storyline, he then goes into a couple other things that happen, and I'll link you the articles down below if you want to look at all of these yourself. But I do want to talk about the main story that apparently was going to happen here. Now, first off, it was technically going to be starting off with the death of Alfred Pennyworth. If you don't know, back in City of Bane, Damian basically invaded Gotham when he wasn't supposed to. In response, Bane broke Alfred's neck, and Alfred has been dead now. January 16, 2023. He's been dead this whole time, okay? For those of you who are like, oh, didn't Alfred just die? No, he died 4 years ago. You want to feel old? It's about 4 years ago now, okay? Anyway, in this version of the timeline, Joker War would have still eventually happened. But in Joker War, instead of defeating the Joker at the ending, the Joker was going to offer to do something for Batman if Batman let him go. We wouldn't have discovered right away, but what it eventually would have been is that the Joker offered to kill Bane on Batman's behalf for the death of Alfred Pennyworth. And Batman was going to let him do this. Now, this means a lot for the Batman character, the one who refuses to kill, refuses to use guns, refuses to be brutal, because this would have been the beginning of a downfall for Batman, because he basically let his greatest villain go with the intent of killing somebody. Superman was also going to be massively changed as well. This version of the story did happen, where Superman came back and he revealed to the world his identity, and him and John got super close together because John really liked having his identity out, so he worked really closely with his father. In this version of the story, Superman was still going to out his identity, but the difference this time was going to be John was not happy with it. Okay? John did not like being in the spotlight to this degree, and this would have started to create a divide between Clark and John. On top of that, Clark began to start something that may sound familiar to a lot of Marvel fans, but he was going to start to push for every superhero to out their identity to the world. They felt that this was the best choice. There should be no secret identities from their heroes. Batman was obviously very opposed to this, as he felt that people being afraid of Batman was a power in itself. While this was going to be running, we were basically also going to get a series known as Last Call that would have told of the new timeline. Okay? It would have told stories and what happened to your favorite superheroes that weren't a mainline superhero, but in the new timeline. Kind of like 52 with Infinite Crisis. Because we were getting a book known as Changing of the Guard. So Death Metal was actually potentially going to be called Death Metal Dark Crisis. Yes, I know we had Death Metal, then we had Dark Crisis, but you're going to hear a lot of things that sound very familiar, and it sounds like a lot of this just got changed to kind of float the DC line for 2 years while they figured out what they wanted to do, which now is Dawn of DC. So anyway, we had Death Metal Dark Crisis was going to end, and at the ending of it, all of your superheroes are going to be aged up 60 years, or at least the significant ones. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. They are now in their 60s. So they were going to need new superheroes to take over the slots. These new superheroes would have been John Kent as Superman, Luke Fox as the new Batman, and Yara Flor, the Brazilian Wonder Woman that showed up briefly, as the new Wonder Woman. Now, what did end up happening was we tried a thing called Future State, where they kind of grabbed the remnants of this 5G and turned them into their own stories. We had, instead of Luke Fox, we had Jace Fox become the next Batman, which I think is a series still going on right now. Tom Taylor took over writing John Kent, Superman, son of Kal-El, and Yara Flor got the Wonder Girl series. So back over at Batman, we were going to get a series called Batman Last Days. The idea of aging Batman up to 60 was to bring him in line with Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, that concept of Batman. He's at the end of his age, he's doing all of this. And the whole Bat family would have been aged up as well. Batman at his new age begins to consider retirement. He begins to make amends with all of those that he has wronged. He begins to retire and call it a day. But the earlier decision to let Joker go off and kill Bane ends up playing out. Joker does in fact kill Bane. The guilt of this forces Batman to just retreat into solitude, and he flees to England. It's over there that he's in search of redemption. Now, if you read through this, they talk about stuff involving Batman in England did still get published, but kind of got placed out of continuity. The book, The Batman the Detective, is brought up as one of the ones that was going to be Batman's adventures in England, which now makes sense why there was a random out of continuity Batman in England storyline, okay? This also states that by letting Joker kill Bane, the death of Alfred wouldn't have been wasted. It would have had ramifications that went and rippled throughout the entire timeline. You know, because if you think about it, Joker War and everything would have happened before Death Metal Dark Crisis, I think. According to this, that's how the timeline would have lined up. So Batman would have dealt with Joker, come back out of Death Metal Dark Crisis, and he would have been aged up to 60. Over in Superman, we would have had Superman Last Days. Now that he is 60 years old, what would have ended up happening is he would have decided to retire because apparently he was beginning to lose his powers. But his retirement would have been Superman and Lois moving to Africa to leave John in charge of Metropolis. Now, remnants of this storyline kind of survived too because John became the new Superman, but Superman got imprisoned in War World with his powers weakening. So, kind of like that. Once again, this is all off of Bleeding Cool, so take it with a grain of salt if you trust it or not, but a lot of this does line up as to what could have happened. So John is actually in the future during most of this. He doesn't like being around his parents because of the fact that he was outed as Superman, basically, Superman John Kent. He doesn't like that his secret identity was out. So what ends up happening is he's in the 31st century, where he also learns that the world ends because of stuff that happens back in the current day, the 5G. So basically he sees like a prophecy that the world's going to end. This brings him back in the new book, The New Superman, #1, where he's kind of protecting Metropolis, trying to prevent the future that he saw in the 31st century from actually coming to be. Over in the Batman side, you would assume that somebody in the Bat family would have stepped up to become Batman, but no, Luke Fox becomes the new Batman over there. Like I said, in the proper continuity, the one that really did happen, we had Jace Fox. But Luke Fox would have taken over as Batman went over to England, which is where a lot of those random England stories that came out of nowhere, that's where that was coming from. Supposedly, according to this article here, the reason they changed from Luke to Jace is because Luke was created by Dan DiDio and his friend Jimmy Palmiotti. The reason Dan DiDio left, they decided they really wanted to stick it to him and not even use the last of his characters. I don't know the reasoning, but whatever. But the next Batman's really good. It's the story of Jace, but as you can tell, the story of Jace is he's the Batman of New York. He moved away and he did his own thing. So him becoming the Batman of Gotham while Batman became the Batman of England never happened. Instead, Bruce Wayne just went around dismantling all the old Batman stuff. Now, this is where it gets really juicy because up to this point, the proposed storyline was that Bruce and Superman were pretty much losing their powers, moving away, aged up to 60, no longer a part of it, while John and everyone was taken over. But you would assume that Damian would have taken over as Batman. Well, the reason Damian didn't take over as Batman is he was still fighting with Bruce over everything that had actually happened. He felt abandoned, he felt betrayed, and instead, he decided to lead the Assassin's Guild, and he began to run Leviathan. So he took over for his mother and his grandfather, and took over both their organizations. This would eventually lead to a Batman versus Robin event, because Luke Fox Batman would have battled against Damian as he deemed Luke to be the imposter. This would have brought John Kent to Gotham, and teaming up with Luke Fox, the new Batman and the new Superman would have defeated Damian, deciding that the world needs a Batman and Superman team up. Now, we did end up getting a Batman versus Robin story, and he did side more with the Al Ghuls, but it didn't play out like this. I mean, Damian just went on a journey to discover who he is. That's basically what happened in the current storyline. Since we also didn't have a Robin after all of this would have happened, Tamara Fox, the sister of Luke Fox, would have decided that she's going to be the new Robin. So that would have been our new Batman and Robin combo, Luke Fox and Tamara Fox. Damian at this point is now just regulated to being the leader of the Assassins. It doesn't mention it, but I assume Dick Grayson would have stayed Nightwing. Red Hood would have, whatever Red Hood was doing, he's still doing Future State stuff. But that's what would have happened. We would have gotten a brand new Robin and Tamara Fox. So that would have brought us to a brand new Batman, brand new Superman, and we still didn't have a Justice League as they were disbanded after Death Metal, you know, when Batman and Superman became too old to do anything. Well, they decided that they were going to emulate a 1999 storyline known as the Legends of the DC Universe, in which Marv Wolfman tried to make a more diverse Justice League. They were going to do a very similar thing with their new Justice League known as the Justice Alliance. We were going to have Luke Fox as Batman. We were going to have John Kent as Superman, Yara Flores the new Wonder Woman, but we were also going to get the team that ended up being the Justice League in the Future State books. We were going to have Joe Mullen. I never know how to properly say her name, but Joe, the Green Lantern, who from Far Sector. We were going to have Jess Chambers, who is the non-binary Flash from the multiverse. They were going to be joining the team as well. And we were going to have Aquawoman on the team. So the whole team that was in Future State was going to become the Justice Alliance, the brand new Justice League, leading the forefront of the DC comic book universe. Now, here's where I find this interesting, because we hadn't seen dates in anything that Rich posted up in here yet. So for all I knew, this all took place in the entirety of 2020. But a lot of this took place over 3 years. So all of this had been going on for DC for 2020, 2021, and 2022, because in 2023, they were going to start a storyline called The Hunt for Batman. Joker was going to return to challenge Luke Fox's Batman, declaring him to be the imposter Batman. To get back at Bruce, he was going to tell the world that Batman was Bruce Wayne, and that Bruce Wayne hired him to kill Bane all the way back in 2020. This apparently was going to be called The Hunt for Batman, and it was going to be a crossover that would spread over multiple books involving the Bat family and everybody involved in this kind of an event. It was at that moment that our new Batman, Luke, decided that he had to bring Bruce Wayne in to face justice. But instead of getting a Batman versus Batman storyline, we just have Bruce Wayne turn himself in. Apparently, that's what they weren't going to have any kind of a fight. Bruce Wayne was going to turn himself in, return from England, going back to Gotham to stand trial for the murder of Bane. He finds the new Justice Alliance standing against him, all of his old villains standing against him, and he's found guilty for hiring someone to kill Bane. But we would have gotten another storyline around this called The Return of Superman. Clark Kent would have come back powerless from Africa. And it turns out that he had been on other adventures as a powerless Superman this entire time and built up a team known as the Authority, both of which you saw going on in Warworld. So this is one of the storylines that stayed in. But Superman and the Authority came by, broke Batman out of prison, and ran off with him. It doesn't go into why Batman decided to go with them, but he did. This puts him in conflict with John. So we would have had Clark Kent versus John Kent. And that would have been a Superman versus Superman storyline and basically be a big generational struggle, according to what he wrote here. This was going to lead to the finale to this whole 5G thing in 2024. It was going to be an event called Batman and Superman against the DC Universe. And it was going to see Superman and the Authority and Batman, both of them aged into their 60s, battling against the entire DC Universe, the Justice Alliance, all the other superheroes, everybody. It was going to be the equivalent of Marvel's Civil War, but just be Batman and Superman versus everybody. Everybody would have chosen sides, would have been the same thing as Marvel Civil War at the end of the day, but that doesn't go into why Batman and Superman thought they were in the right for this. But I mean, I guess that doesn't matter. The story never happened. In order to fight against everyone, Superman goes through an experimental technology where he's going to get his powers back. But it goes haywire and his powers begin to start growing exponentially. He gets super, super powerful. Stuff starts going crazy. Now, because his powers are growing insane on this last chapter, it tells us that he was threatening the existence of Earth itself, becoming the greatest threat to humanity that it has ever faced. With the knowledge of the future from John Kent that the world was going to end because of his father, Bruce Wayne is forced to make his own ultimate sacrifice to save the planet. And they didn't disclose how. It says right here, undisclosed means. This would eventually lead to the death of Batman and Superman, only leaving the new guard in charge. So Jace, John, Yara Flor, I don't remember the rest of the Justice League Alliance. They don't matter. But all of those characters were going to be the new Justice League. And that was it. That was how we were going to end 2024. It was going to be with officially passing the torch to the new heroes. Now, they had an idea that they were going to use Black Label to continue out-of-continuity stories of your classic superheroes. So we would have still had Batman stories of Bruce Wayne, Superman stories of Clark Kent. Like, they weren't going to completely get rid of them. They just weren't going to have them in the main continuity any longer. But in 2025, that was when they were going to decide if this experiment worked. Did they create a new generation of DC Comics? Did they bolster numbers? If DC Comics, Dan DiDio, and Warner Brothers decided that it worked, they were going to continue this line as is. If it was decided that this didn't work, they had some big red reset button to crisis the entire universe and bring back everyone. Now, the further you read into this and a lot of stuff going on, apparently there was a lot of backlash from the writers at DC. Again, this is all hearsay in off of these articles, but apparently big names like Scott Snyder, Grant Morrison were like, I guess Grant Morrison was really on board, but Scott Snyder wasn't on board. A lot of people in DC Comics were very divided whether or not this was going to work. Some of these reports in here say that writers joined up, but saw the backlash and then left. So I don't know how this would have played out. On one hand, this makes me excited, like if this had happened, because it would have finally broken up the status quo. Things would have changed forever in theory. Like, if we got rid of Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, we allowed a new generation to take over, this could have been crazy. At the same time, I don't know how DC would have done without a Bruce Wayne book, a Clark Kent book. I mean, we've had Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne around since the 1940s. Yeah, they get changed and aged up, and we want status quos to change, and they have a couple of times here and there and overall. But we've never just gotten rid of those two superheroes. Even if you're going to tell out-of-continuity stories, you still got rid of Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent. So I don't know how this would have panned out. I'm pretty sure, based on how we all reacted to 5G, myself included, we would not have been on board with this. I'm pretty sure most of the comic book community would have just been up in arms going, what is happening at DC? But none of it happened. A lot of this stuff you can see in the remnants from Future State to Infinite Frontier to the eventual actual Dark Crisis, which I've always thought is kind of what's been going wrong with DC since 2020, 2021, and 2022. Because if you think about all of this, we had COVID. They were coming out of all of these plans and had to make new plans. They were scrambling for it all. And they kind of like patchwork together what I thought worked in the end. But I'm happy that we're moving in the Dawn of DC direction. We have a whole new plan in place. But what do you think about this? If this is real, if this was actually going to happen, what is your opinion? Would this have been the storyline to kill DC Comics officially? Or would this have brought DC into a brand new era of excitement? I gave you my opinion. I think this would have killed DC. I think at the end of this, they would have had a batch of fans, but they would be nowhere near the market share that they have now. I think it would have gone nowhere near what they were hoping for. But 5G was dumped. It got turned into Infinite Frontier and Future State. Dan DiDio was let go or he left. We've never known for certain about the whole thing. And a lot of these ideas like New Batman and John Kent and stuff like that, they're all going on just in their own corner of the comic book market. So if you like these kinds of videos, me looking at some behind the scenes stuff like that, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to our channel. I'm trying to do at least one of these a week. I'm currently working on a couple projects, manga versus American comic books, which did lead to my question of are comics dying? And I did a whole bunch of research for that one. That's going to be coming out eventually as well. I'm also looking at the problem with Damian Wayne because you guys keep asking for me to straighten out Damian Wayne's continuity. And it's confusing. And it's one of my biggest problems at DC that Damian Wayne is forever a little shit that is 13. But anyway, thank you guys so much for your continued support. I'll see you next time right here.